Welcome to another episode of the Wenner Folsom podcast, your source for battle-tested leadership and resiliency. And I'm really excited about today. Today, we're joined by one of my really close friends, Amish Shah, who you're going to learn a little bit more about how we met in a moment. He is one of the most inspiring individuals I know, and he is an entrepreneur, community champion, and education enthusiast. He's helped make the South Bend of the Elkhart region a better place to live and work for more than 25 years. He's been the CEO since 2008 of Krest, and he's led it to become a 500 million supply chain and fulfillment business that serves Fortune 100 companies globally. And I'm really excited today because we're going to jump into a lot of different topics, but I think what it's done for me, just learning more about him and his community and how he sees the world, is a lot of people, me included in the past, didn't understand success and wealth and abundance and had some negative stories from my upbringing related to this. And what Amish has done amongst his buddies and friends and a number of other members that I've met now and community that I've met now is, as you're more successful in business and entrepreneurship and in life, it just makes you more who you are. So if you are driven and your values are based on service and growth and giving back and making a difference, you're going to do more of that. And this man has inspired me in so many ways, from how he loves his family to how he shows up and serves his community and his employees and his team, to his friends, and just overall enjoys life. So I'm really grateful to be here with you today, Amish, having a good conversation.
Thank you, Josh. Great to see your smiling face, buddy.
Thanks. And so, hey, I thought it was really funny how synchronicity happens, and how we met is, we were in Vegas at an event and randomly met in the parking lot of an event. And we're like, hey, what's up? Didn't even know each other, any backgrounds. And this was about, I want to say in 2007, 2008-ish.
Yeah, it was
and
a long
we're just
time
like,
ago.
we're just like, hey, let's go out. And we went out, had a great time together and built this friendship. So it's interesting how these synchronistic things can happen, and then just kept in touch over the years. And I don't even think I really knew what you did for a long time. And then one day we were talking and I was like, this amazing entrepreneur who's innovating in the world and making a difference. And so then it recircled this last year with your YPO organization, when I went out and supported you guys on this epic adventure in Escalante and, camping in 15 or 20 mile hike under the stars. And we were doing some deep transformational work. And it's just really cool to have this deep friendship that we connected really deep, but kept in touch to really get resurfaced and reintegrated. So it's really nice to have you on.
Yeah. And I tell you, one of my favorite words and kind of experiences is serendipity, right? So ran into each other, met each other, stayed in contact for all these years, never saw each other. I followed your career and all the great things you were doing along the way and motivationally. And then it was so awesome. The first time we see each other is all these years later at Escalante, and had an amazing time. So that was super cool.
Such a cool adventure. And it was a bucket list for me. So it was really cool to be able to see you and do a really cool bucket list item with this amazing group of men in the mountains. So really cool. I know when we were chatting on the hike, one of the conversations we had is you talked about, because I'm just so fascinated by entrepreneurship and really stimulates me to learn different practices. Because as a fellow entrepreneur, I'm just constantly learning. And it's one of the best ways we learn about ourselves. But it is really a warrior mindset. Like the way you grow a business is there's constant plateaus. You get to this area, you run into a brick wall, you have to figure out how to innovate. You're constantly surrounded by failure and majority of businesses fail, like 90% fail. So I guess what I'm curious first is, for anybody listening that is either already an entrepreneur or aspirational towards it, because we do have a lot of military first responders, but a lot of them transition into, entrepreneur careers because they're structured, they have mindset, perseverance, and they can do very well in it. So what do you think has been a couple of your keys to success? Because again, most companies fail. And not only that, but you've been in business for 25 years and continuing to grow and innovate, which that in itself takes a warrior mindset to just navigate the different climates, navigate changes in business, to either keep growing. What do you think are a couple of your skill sets or fundamentals or key things that have allowed you to continue to persevere?
So you're absolutely right. Entrepreneurship is the quintessential definition of being a warrior. You have to be resilient. You have to have self-awareness. You really also need the support of others. And if you don't mind, I'll share kind of this story that I love to tell. So for many years, I loved to climb mountains. Every 2 years, I would summit one of the big ones around the world. I did it every 2 years because it sucks. It's hard. So you needed a year to forget about the pain. But the analogy that I use is, when you're starting a business, even think about things that you're doing new in life, the first thing you do is, you want to get to the top. So you're looking at the top, this peak, whether it's Kilimanjaro or, you name it. Usually you're clean, you've just showered, you're energized, you don't have any pain, you're not sore yet, you're not injured. You don't know how you're going to get to the top, but you know that you need to get there. So you start going down the trail, you go down the switchbacks, time goes on, you get tired, pain, you almost lose confidence or faith because you run out of steam. But the further you get up the mountain and you ascend, you get more clarity on what that trailhead looks like to get you to the top. And oftentimes what happens is you need help. You need support. Sometimes you need to ask a friend to carry your pack, because something's wrong. And you have to have at least the ability to let others help you, and you help others. You have to look out for them. Then what happens is you finally, as almost right when you're running out of steam and you're hungry and your stomach hurts and you're getting this elevation sickness, you see the peak, right? And then you actually summit. Well, then you're like, yeah, I did it. And then you realize, oh shit, I got to go back down. And going back down uses a whole different set of muscles. It uses a whole different mindset. And by the way, you think you've achieved the peak, but the reality is going down is almost like sustaining success. Getting to the top is one thing. It's like going on a road trip with a family, right? You get to where you're going. It's great. The drive home always sucks because you've already had the fun that you wanted to. This is the haul back. So I think by keeping that warrior mindset of really you have to be tenacious, you have to be resilient, you have to figure out ways to re-energize yourself, you have to engage with community, you've got to be able to ask for help, and you've got to have this just extreme sense of self-awareness, like know what your body is going through, know what your mind is going through, know when you don't know what you're doing, and being okay with that. And I think that's the general philosophy of like mountain climbing or tackling any really big, challenging issue. I think there's so many similarities to it.
I really love that. Just climbing the mountain and what does it take to get there? And as you were even talking about that, I could relate to that as myself, is a lot of times you can't see the summit and you're having to have some faith that you're in the right direction. You run into a lot of roadblocks, but without help, people could turn around or you die, right? Somebody in a mountain, right? So help is critically essential, the perseverance to do it. And it sounds like you mentioned reaching the top. And then how do you manage success? What has that been like? Has that been a little lonely journey, or has that been a challenge to figure out how do you learn to deal with success? Because again, if you're achieving and going after something, especially for us warriors, we love a mission. So it's like, show me the mission, I'll go after it at all costs, but it takes a little bit of warrior strength of armoring up to do it. It's hard to maintain that in all areas of life. So I'm curious, how has that been for you of like managing that success? Because again, I think the reason I want to bring this up is I think so many people put success on this pinnacle of like, oh, once you reach success, you don't have any problems. And it's no different. We're humans. We have problems no matter where we're at. The problems change based on where you're at. But I think realizing like, oh, just because you achieve a level of success doesn't mean you don't have problems. It just means there are different types of problems. And you're up a little bit against, at least my experience has been a little bit outside of, you feel like you can't always share because people are like, who are you to have problems? You have this success. It's almost like they invalidate it. Have you experienced any of that?
I think this whole thing is a journey if you think about it. And part of my journey, I think early on, like when I first experienced success, I was, as you would say, a lone wolf. And so here I'm a warrior, but really a focused lone wolf. I did whatever I could in a solo environment to get there. And I got there. And it was lonely at the top. Absolutely. You don't have anybody to talk to. You can't share certain things about your failures, your fears, even your successes, because you don't want to sound like a jerk and be braggadocious. So here you're doing all this stuff, but you're kind of alone. And through the journey, and this is, it's taken a lot, but to learn vulnerability and to let others in. And I know when I was going through K4, and even prior to K4, what really helped me through K4 was actually being in a YPO forum. So some sort of a peer group where you're opening up your heart and soul. And as men, that's not necessarily how we're bred, right? We got to be tough. We got to win. Don't show fear, don't show sadness, don't show emotion, just show grit and integrity. And you learn that that's not healthy. And not only is it not healthy, it's not sustainable, because then you hold all these traumas inside and all this stuff in your gut and your senses and your brain and your emotions. And so what I found was early on, success, what do they say? If you want to go fast, go alone, or if you want to go far, go together. Forgot what that is, something like this, right? And that was kind of what I learned along the way is let's go together and open up your soul, open up your mind, be vulnerable, right? And once you become vulnerable, I started finding that the success of the business started changing because it
Mm,
wasn't about winning financially. It was about winning a lot more comprehensively, meaning,
mm,
how can I make an impact, right? How can I make an impact on the associates that I work with? I don't want to do this alone. I want to bring them up along the journey with me. I want them to be successful. Like, I
mm,
not only have the opportunity, I would say an obligation, but also the honor to be able to impact other lives. And then it's like, bring your friends along the journey and make new friends. And then you've got the community at large. You've got all these other organizations that, if you're decent at what you're doing, a little bit of your spirit and mind and energy and effort can actually help lift everybody up. And I would say that's, for me, my kind of emotional flywheel started spinning, because I'm like, wow, the balance is there. I feel good from a success standpoint, from a business, but really I feel good from more about the community and the others that I'm bringing along the journey, that help create the tribe. And then when you create the tribe, let me tell you, Josh, the last 26 years, I started in 96, I've had as many lows as I've had highs. And when you hit those lows and you're alone, it's dangerous, right? I
mm,
mean, we all do whatever we do when we're in our lows. And usually it's not healthy. Always
mm,
it's not healthy. I'll say that.
mhm,
But when you hit a low and you've got a tribe, and you've got
mhm,
a forum, you've got, a round table, you got a lot of people there with you. One, to support you, to love you, but also to mentor you and counsel you and hold you accountable and
mm,
kind of help pull you out. And so I
mm.
think that's how personally I've sustained, a grind of 26 years of running a business. People usually just look at the success, the trophies I have on my wall, but they don't realize, like, oh, the effort, the
Mm,
pain,
mm,
the agony, the fear, the amount of times that I was kind of looking at death's door
mm.
and I was in the gutter trying to get my way out of it. And, those aren't things that the world sees. But I think in whatever you do professionally, with every success comes all of that hard work and that grind, those obstacles that we all have to get over.
I love how you said it's community, tribe, like, and that's what we're big advocates on, is having a tribe. You're not the lone wolf. And I do know, just from doing men's work for a decade now, and seeing you in the roundtables and also meeting your YPO forum, which are epic group of men. But I know there's men and women in a lot of YPO forums too. It's not just men. Yours just happened to be men when we connected. But there's something about other men getting, or other humans getting, to hold space with you through the pain. And I know for me, that's been the biggest game changer of coming off this lone wolf status, is just letting people in. Here's what I'm going through. I don't even need to fix it a lot of times. I just need to let people know, like, oh, let me share this with somebody, not just hold it. And for some reason, that's such a relief of like, I'm seen. I think I'm seen in the pain. I'm seen in the heartache. I'm seen in the challenge. And that, for me, moves mountains. And then also being able to get good advice and support and mentorship. Because when we're dysregulated, when we're offline, we're really dysregulated. Our nervous system's either in that fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And we can't see clearly. We don't have empathy. We don't have compassion. We can't really rationally think. So having other support around that we trust, that's got us, to also give us good feedback and challenge us to do our practices, to stay above the line, and help give us feedback on how to engage, can save us from a lot of heartache. My dad just recently did a 3-day trip as I moved from Reno to Austin. And I have this crew that we check in every day on these Marco Polo apps. And I was showing just a little bit of it. And he's like, and he's 77. And he's like, this is wild to me. And he was like, I never had this. Like, he's like, you'd always just do it on your own, and you make the best decisions with your gut, and you screw up most of the time because you don't have any good counsel or guys to push off things. So to actually have other humans, men or women, to help you, he's like, I couldn't even imagine where I would have been in a different world if I had that. Right. So I'm realizing we're really privileged and a great place to be. And anybody listening, if you don't have a crew, find a crew, find a group, find a YPO forum or an EO forum or a men's group or K4 or something, where you could be around a community that will support you, hold you accountable, that you feel safe with, confidential, that will elevate you and help you, because it changes the game. Super powerful.
Yeah, and just a couple thoughts that I've gleaned, or some experiences that I've gleaned, is that, well, the one benefit of having a tribe, whatever that looks like, is that, look, we all go through things. It could be depression, it could be alcoholism, it could be fear, it could be uncertainty, it could be we're not feeling adequate. I mean, there's these things, right? And we feel them. And sometimes if you don't have a crew, you feel like you're maybe the only one that's going through it. And when you connect with a broader audience, a broader group of people that you can trust, and you have the courage to say what's in your heart, and somebody else looks over and maybe gets a tear in his eye and says, oh, I feel the same way. And you're heard, but you also realize you're not alone and you're not unique in experiencing some form of discomfort, whatever it might be. And I think that it's like a big hug, right? It's a huge hug. But and then from the other perspective is, as I was talking about climbing a mountain, as you ascend the mountain, what ends up happening is your perspective becomes clearer the higher you go. I really look at that as when you get around a group of people, you could climb a mountain alone, or you could climb a mountain with somebody that's been there, and they're going to provide that perspective to you now. So gaining perspective, man, it's like, why reinvent the wheel 1,000 times? Use the wisdom of your crowd, because chances are what you've gone through, somebody else might have gone through that before, and they can share what it felt like and what they did to get through it, or how they gathered success and what they did when they were successful. And, I think there's just so much to, outside of just feeling comforted and supported, it's also getting perspective, which really iron sharpens iron. So you get around a great group of people and all of a sudden, man, you can do things that you never even imagined. And I think that's the fun side of it. There's the support side, and then there's the winning side of it. And whatever
offense and defense, right? There's like the defense side of, block the exit so I don't run, if you will. And then there's the offense side of like, hey, how can you make this a win? How can you change your perspective instead of this being a loss or a devastation? How do you make this the biggest area you've ever won in? And it gets you rethinking in the right direction, and you flip things from losing to winning.
Absolutely.
As you mentioned that, I remember that was one of the things that really impressed me about your YPO crew. Your YPO crew is a really elite level of individuals that have all achieved a different level of success, but more than most, I would put it that way. And what I loved is that, like, I think so many people, I just want to briefly mention this for a moment, because I've heard so many people talk about it. They have a story around once you reach financial success, that especially what's happened in recent times with corporations and different things like that. I think there's a lot of people that want to play victim, and they want to make companies the villains. And so I also wanted to just talk about this. As soon as you're blaming somebody, you're in the villain, victim, savior, Dharma triangle or trauma triangle, in my perspective. So this is what I want to talk about for a minute. That anybody that goes there, how do you get out of that? Because if you can look at a different perspective, like here's what I'll say to anybody listening. If you start to make that the enemy, anybody who's achieved success or financial success or business success, you can never achieve it. And so it's really important that you get out of that so that you can actually step into that. So I wanted to give a perspective on that. I remember when I was spending time, you could never have told, like, there was no difference between anybody in the crew and myself. I've been on some trips because I've been in entrepreneurship for a long time, and I've been around a lot of entrepreneurial, primarily men, who valued, I think, significance as their top value. And so because of that, I almost felt like I wasn't at their level, right? I always would be around them and they'd be like, well, what have you achieved? And I'm an amazing individual. I got a lot of skill sets, but I wasn't in the same financial achievement house or business success house that they were. And I could sense there was always a level like, oh, you're here and I'm here. And they would tend to put people at similar levels of business at their status. But I also noticed they never felt adequate compared to, if they'd done 100 million, they were chasing the $1 billion. If they were $1 billion, they were chasing the $2 billion. And there was a weird dynamic there. Whereas I felt with your guys' crew, you would have never told, like, there was no dynamics. It was just like, hey, anybody would have grabbed anything. Everybody was, because I think that what I at least took from it was everybody's value system was service guys, growth service guys. And so it was like, when you're around a bunch of growth and service humans, there is no, the financial success, the business success isn't the goal. The goal is, this sounded like a good area to grow in. Let me grow and expand to serve, but it wasn't about the significance. Is that a fair assessment? Or I'm just curious, because for me, it really moved me deeply. I was like, really moved, like, wow, this is so inspiring. It changed my whole narrative from previously. I looked at success more significance is who I'd attracted. And I was kind of like, this isn't what I want to be. And so it kind of reinforced the story. What am I chasing, or what am I achieving for? If this is the individuals that are unhealthy, cheating on their spouses, like just way off the thing. And then to get around a, altruistic, amazing group of individuals that are service and growth based, that want to make a difference, that there's no comparison of it's just like, who are you as a human? And that's what I value. If you're an amazing human, awesome, let's grow. Like, that was my experience of really different. And so I wanted to share that just because it's not about the financial success. It's about who you are as a person is what I took from it. In your value system, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of success or no success, your values are the people that you're around. It just brings out more. I'm curious your thoughts on that, or what comes up for you around that experience.
So part of it, it almost doesn't make, it's counterintuitive because when you're a competitive person, let's just say you're a trained athlete, you're an Olympic runner, right? Your goal is to constantly knock a tenth of a second off of your time. That's success. Like you have to get faster, better, leaner, whatever it might be. And in business, generally it's the same. You want to continue to grow your business, grow your market share, grow your profits. There comes a time when the competitive nature, which is significance, if you will, defines your success until you start to recognize that there's a greater good. That's why, with age comes wisdom. But what I really, and people complain about this younger generation, what I admire about this younger generation is they do kind of put their values first. They don't look at significance as much as inclusion and wanting to be part of something bigger versus, not all of them, but a lot of them that I've, related to. I kind of break it down. And what I've been the last couple of years is studying Stoicism, right? When you get deep into Stoicism, it's not about me comparing myself to you, right? Josh, you're stronger, you got more muscles, you're better looking, whatever, right? But it's about me celebrating your success and learning from what are the things, what are the behaviors, what are the disciplines? How do you get to where you are successfully? And how do I learn from all of these amazing people and companies and things to be successful, my best version of myself, right? And I think that's it, is when you start, when you stop comparing yourself to somebody else, because somebody's always going to have more money. They're going to be faster, smarter, whatever it might be, right? You're going to be a miserable human because you're in this cycle of, jealousy and envy. And those are not emotions that drive happiness and joy. But of all of these people that did great things, they must have had some playbooks that helped them get there. And so I like to study the successes and how they got there and see how of those things can I learn to, again, be the best version of me, because I'm unique from them. And my values are different from them. So I want to align to the things that drive my values instead of the things that drive my profit, right? And there's a lot of people with a whole lot of money that are very lonely, that are very miserable, that don't have that connection. And there's a lot of people with a whole lot of no money that are very happy and very content, because sometimes possessions and sometimes greed and all of these things, man, it eats your brain. It makes you crazy because it's more and more. I've seen the simplicity when I've hiked through places in India or through South America, and I've seen people that literally make $3,000 or $4,000 a year, and they're smiling and happy, right? They've got community, they've got everything that they need. They've got love, they've got security, they've got the basics, and they're amazingly happy. And I met billionaires that are just the biggest pieces of crap you'd ever want to hang out with because they've lost their soul. So when you're soul-based, right, and purpose-based, I just think that's back in the day, that only was left for, the elders, right? Because they finally got enough wisdom to chill out. But I'm grateful because we're learning, that, we should all live that way of being grateful for the things that we have, but also just starting to consider, what is our best version of ourselves and how do we do that now?
Hey, we thank you for listening to the Wenner Folsom podcast. Just a couple quick notes. First, if you are a man and you're looking for an honorable and inspiring group of men to hold you accountable and challenge you to grow in your relationships, your fitness, your career, your finances, and your life, go to www.k4men.com. And if you are a veteran, first responder, or man or woman who deals with trauma, and you are looking for some resiliency tools and skills for you, your team, and your organization, go to valorresiliency.com. Hope to see you there. Back to the podcast. I love what you're saying is you're taking away the comparison, which is, I think, what leads to that villain, victim, savior. From my lens, the inadequacy story would be getting triggered. Somebody feels inadequate. They compare themselves to somebody else. And instead of getting really curious, like, wow, how do I learn from this to take the best things that I could take to become the best version of that in myself and go after my dreams? They label that as this person's bad or evil. And then my experience is that in order for them to feel better about themselves is why they do it. And then they cut off their ability to achieve it. And so that's where I really wanted to share it is if you get really curious, you get really excited and learn the flavors of it. How do they do it? It's like teaching somebody to fish. Somebody's fishing and you're going hungry. you're better to say, hey, can you show me how to fish so I can keep fishing versus try to steal their fish or tell them they're bad because they caught fish and now you're still empty, hungry. Like, go learn how to fish. And I also noticed I imagine you're much more likely to share when people ask you for strategies and advice versus handouts, right? Very different mindset. One is like entitled, like they take away all the hard work and effort and everything you've put into it to actually achieve it, and entitled versus the other one is teach me how. I imagine that's why you do all these entrepreneurship ventures. You want to show other people how to innovate, how to create. Like, what got you into that element of it? Was there an inspiration that came from that?
The beauty of like working with startups and entrepreneurs is, as much as I was at a conference yesterday and I engage with a lot of these startups, and they're just like grateful for, the time that I'm giving. And I've said it to them, what I learned from them is innumerable. I mean, it's amazing because entrepreneurs are kind of on the cutting edge of doing great things. And so they're subject matter experts of some amazing, passionate project. And you get to learn so much from them. So I can provide perspective of the things that I've learned along the way, but they can provide perspective on new markets and new ways of doing things and total innovation and total, like, talk about resilience and being scrappy. They're doing a lot with a little, and they're figuring out hacks along the way. And I always glean a little bit from that, but I love it. I was working with an entrepreneur. He was over actually a couple of days ago. And I remember when he got started, and he's eclipsed 10 million in business now. And I was like there on the floor when he was writing out a business plan. And how great is this to see an idea go to prototype, go to proof of concept, go to, oh my God, I'm almost dead and out of money, to reiterating their scope and vision and mission, and boom, it takes off. Like, it's energizing, it's inspiring. It just makes you see how anybody is really capable of doing big things. They put their mind, soul, body, spirit, effort and resources towards it. Humans are amazing and capable of doing pretty damn much anything in the world.
I think one of the things I'm deeply passionate about entrepreneurship, and what I love is I believe it fuels the economy. So innovation, not only does it create new ideas and innovates, but also all the people that are employed to support a mission. Is there's now a culture, there's a tribe, there's a community that get to live their well-being around, serving this greater mission. And I think that's one of the things that I was really inspired by when we were chatting, when we were hiking in Escalante, is you talked about, the traditional way of scaling a business. And then you took a different look and said, how do I help everybody achieve their dreams? How do I create culture? How do I create community? How do I focus on tribe? And then that actually became the lifeblood of your culture. Is that anything you'd like to share on that? Because I think I imagine it would be pretty difficult sometimes when you get caught up in, like you said, the growth, the competitiveness, how do I go after market share, and driving a team to rechanging focus to like, how do I make this infuse the best culture possible in that? Was there like a moment that you had to make that shift?
There was several moments. And I think what part of it came down to is, I'm not going to go through the whole history, but you'd mentioned, we're a little over 500 million in revenue. And I remember when we were a million and got to 10 million. And I remember when it was to the point where I need buy-in from everybody within the organization, not just buy-in, but soul and passion. Like, I needed them to be fully committed. And you realize, we overuse, I think, culture sometimes, the word culture, because it's defined differently by different people. But for me, the culture was like, it was the soul, it was the heartbeat. It was getting everybody aligned and everybody waking up, fired up about the organization. We started doing a lot more work in communication, transparency, development, and getting everybody super psyched about it. And all of a sudden, it wasn't just me, trying to grow the company. It was the entire organization, and we were a force to reckon with. And all of a sudden, what happened is this wave came, and we've got all these people, and we kept growing and growing and growing because it was ignited, right? It's like you've ignited the spark, and everybody. And by the way, I'm super proud of this. Last week, we promoted this young man. He started at 18 years old. He made $850. He was a temporary employee. He's now the general manager 10 years later of a division, making good money and doing great things. And look, you want to talk about, things that you're proud of. When I go to my grave one day, right? It's not the big account that we landed or a bonus check. It's the, I gotta get choked up about it. It's things like this, like human beings who have been so bound by the culture of the organization that they grow and they develop, and then they become beacons to others about the culture. And so I think that, and so I say, it's like a triple bottom line, is that one, you get to influence and impact great people. Well, then the organization gets to grow. Well, then you get to influence and impact your community, right? So I mean, we donate 7 figures a year to local and regional charities. And then my associates get involved in those organizations. And by the way, they get a different sense of leadership development because now they're making an impact, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club or it's Junior Achievement or, fill in the blank, Habitat for Humanity. They're now seeing the impact that they're making outside of just the four walls of a commercial engine, like an economic engine. They're seeing, wow, then they get pumped up. Then they teach their family, the gift of giving time or treasure, whatever it is that you have the more of. And that's like, that just keeps going. And, not to be cheesy, but it kind of is that like energy that makes the world a little better place. And I got to play a small role in igniting that fuse, right? And that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, what I'm really hearing from you is service. Again, it's your value of service. Which I believe that's where, as men, again, because we do a lot of men's work, and that's a lot of the work with men is, hey, how do you do your healing in place? How do you go out in the world as leaders? And that can be different for each man. Some may be, a father at home, or the best spouse they could be to their, partner to their spouse. It could be one of the guys in our community, just, one mayor of his town, so like a police chief, or this, where you have a company, and how do you infuse the team? Because like, how many employees do you guys have?
About 600 or so.
So like now, instead of you driving this mission or you and a leadership team, you are inspiring and empowering 600 individuals and that whole group of energy, of vitality to go out into the world, right? It's like, that's now the impact that you guys are making. So you're creating this wave of momentum that all 600 people, and then I see the story you're sharing. I imagine that story gets shared. And now the people that are going, wow, who else could this be in my family or in my community? And like that one story, 850 to now general manager, whole different shift in their whole lineage. Like that's lineage changes, right?
It is.
And then sharing that story, people get inspired, like, oh, I can create whatever I want in this community. So you're having people that spend their lifetime in the company, is what I'm hearing, right?
And it's service is the right word. And so my love language is kind of acts of service. So it's very aligned to, why it feels good for me, because serving others is probably one of the biggest gifts that you can give and receive, because you're doing something but gaining so much more. So to be able to do it in the community is one thing, but to be able to do it in a business where, as you mentioned, that has like this domino effect, because it's a one-to-many impact. So now there's many people that are servicing however they feel appropriate, whether it's in their church or it's in their community or it's in their gym or it's in their, whatever ignites their passion, but they then get to serve. It's a great part of having the honor of being a leader and having, the ultimate honor of having to be a role model to some. Like, you don't take that shit lightly. That is a legitimate responsibility. And when that's the thing about running a company, or like it or not, eyes are on you. And people do model the behaviors of the leaders around them. So if you're not acting in accordance to your values, you might get the opposite effect, where other people think it's okay to not be service-minded, to be a tyrant, right? If I was a big tyrant and everybody thought I was cool, I'm going to develop a culture of tyrants, and they're going to think it's okay. And God forbid, we don't need any more tyrants in this world.
Very true. Yeah, they're constantly modeling what leaders go first. People are modeling what the leaders do, how you behave, how you show up. So your level of integration is reflective all throughout the culture, and the work you're doing and how you behave is impacting everybody. You mentioned you were going through a recalibration before we jumped on. Anything you'd like to share a little bit more about where you're at, what stage you're at currently?
Yeah. So recalibration, I think that I almost call it an evolution. 26 years business, and I would even say the same thing in life, is during these cycles of life or cycles of business. I read a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And there's a lot to be said during the different phases or cycles of life or business. You kind of have enough self-awareness, and you have the open-mindedness, the kind of the learning velocity. You need to be a lifelong learner to realize sometimes you got to change the playbook. If you're a football fan or what have you, I'm a Notre Dame guy. And so we were losing a few games this year, and Tommy Rees changed the playbook a little bit. You can't keep calling the same plays if they're losing. Either it's a people issue or it's a playbook issue. In my case, it was time to really start thinking about the next generation of leadership within my organization. So it started with that, starting to look at, I had great people that got me here, and I still love them to death. But it was really time to have a new generation of leadership that have different perspectives, that bring different gifts and resources and experience to the table. Well, we're doing that. And now as we're doing that, we're actually able to build a new playbook because we've got different experiences, right? So, you change the wide receiver coach and all of a sudden you might be playing some different calls and maybe even hiring a different group of people under them. And so that's been the recalibration or the evolution that we've been going through, because it is hard. Growing a company is hard enough. Sustaining growth is really hard, and continuing when you get to this level of saying, hey, let's do another 10 or 20 or 30% growth. I think it's the further you get down it, the harder it becomes, unless you're willing and able to start thinking about changes in the world, changes in the economy, changes in how you do business, changes in leadership. So it's like right when you get used to doing something, it was my summer camp theory. I'd be at summer camp, and by the end of the week, when I'm finally like courageous enough to ask a girl to kiss me, it was like time to go. And then I have to wait till next summer, right? Till you start getting smart enough to start asking on the Sunday when you get there, not the Saturday before you leave. And so it's like right when I start to get comfortable, it's time to change the game plan a little bit. And it's like being comfortable, being uncomfortable has been this theme, which it's hard, but it's, I think, a great way to grow and to continue to evolve as a human, but also as a business, because I owe it to the 600 people that work with us to continue to drive things forward so they can continue to have opportunities.
It's interesting as you're mentioning that. I definitely feel like that's a fundamental skill set, getting comfortable with uncomfortability. I also think there can be the opposite approach. Like, I know I was probably a little bit too risk-based early on in my career because I was so comfortable. I would jump too fast, too quick, take too much risk. So I think if you're a heavy risk taker, you may need to take a little bit more time to assess, the actual risk in a situation or think through scenarios. And I imagine if you're somebody who likes to take a little bit more time and gets more comfortable, you have to balance those polarities out, right? Depending on your side.
A strategic advisor, she's wonderful and brilliant, mentioned to me this term, and she said, boundaries give you freedom. Where you put your boundaries are based on your risk tolerance or where you are from a priority and a discipline standpoint. So I'm not the most disciplined person and I'm all over the place. So I've got to keep tight boundaries on myself so I can have the freedom to move forward fast. Because if I start to widen those boundaries, I'm bumping side by side. And there's a time to have creative juices flowing, but there's a time to stay focused to help move things forward.
How do you put those boundaries in place? Is it more just you get clear on your vision and then you build timelines around the vision so you're tight on that? Or what would you say, or one of the ways you do that?
So for me, to be honest and vulnerable to you and the group, is that personal accountability isn't necessarily my number one skill set. I have to rely on my tribe. I have to rely on my coach. I have to rely on, others to help hold me accountable. So to be honest enough with myself that that's not a skill set of mine. I could be a disaster if I wanted to. So I create the boundaries, I share the boundaries, and then I report out how I'm doing. And I ask for help when I'm starting to sway.
Outside accountability is what I'm hearing is, the vision, the goal, but which I'm finding that's like the trend with everything. I'm finding we all need accountability. We all need support. And the more public it goes, the better off we are. I even know for that show I did public accountability, which is the first time I've ever done it. I was like, I'm going to go public. And it was my, Philip inspired me to do it. He's like, you should go public. And I was, hesitant, but then I did the same thing with the show and the feminine cleanse I did recently. And one of the things that was so cool, it was the first time I experienced it, is because I went public and shared the process and the journey. When I actually did the show, for many times in my past, I would achieve something, but I would feel really alone, because I never told anybody. I was a lone wolf, not telling anybody what I was doing. And then I'd achieve success and I'd get there and be like, this doesn't feel good. And this time I was telling so many people about it, which is so uncomfortable. And I didn't even care if I meddled, but just getting there, all of a sudden I felt seen. And I was like, oh, I get to celebrate with community on this thing that I did because I took everybody with me and I used that accountability. And then it created this really cool structure that I learned of like, oh, I'm with community now, experiencing that. And it made it so much more rich.
Yeah,
so I love that.
Hearing that's a really cool, I would say almost unanticipated consequence of having, public or at least group accountability, is that you then get to share your success with others that helped you along the way. So they actually get a little bit of inspiration and joy out of it versus keeping it in yourself and staying disciplined and swaying. Nobody knows about it. You ran that marathon, but nobody's there to kind of high five you at the end, right?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned too is that people see the journey and they see the suck and they see how hard it is. And it gives them more appreciation for the success versus I think most of our society's in a phase where we only want to show people the perfect version of once we're there. And then when they see that, they're like, oh, Well, I'm sure they have a story around it because they never saw the journey. They never saw where we started. They never saw, I had a guy after that was kind of a dick to me when I showed him. And then later he reached back out and he's like, oh man, sorry. I thought you were just this guy that had all these genetics. And I showed these before and afters of like, he's like, oh, I saw like how hard, like, man, you had to work hard. And so he kind of recircled, but I think that's part of what I've learned is when we share the journey, people realize how hard it is. And that's most of life is hard, like changing habits, changing patterns, having an amazing relationship, having a great business, investing. It's one thing to make money. It's another thing to keep it, right? There's all these different areas, your health, your fitness. And one thing seems to be true. I'm curious. I got one more question before we start to wrap this up is I remember there's a quote by Warren Buffett that says saying no is one of the keys to investing. And he goes, the most successful businesses, the most successful investors say no more than anybody else. And what I'm finding that to be true with health. It's actually saying no to the sugar and the bad foods and the other things that the more I say no, the better my health gets. I'm finding the more I say no, because I'm single and dating, the more I say no to unaligned relationships or unhealthy relationships, I get better. And I'm still not as far along on business. So I'm curious, do you find the same thing in business? Is it saying no more than saying yes is the key to success?
It by far, by a multitude, is a lot harder. It takes more courage to not do things than to say yes. Where I'm at in my life, I get great invitations for a lot of access and really super cool things, right? So it's hard to say no to cool shit. However, I've got 4 kids, I got a wife, I got a business, I got my health, I've got, but then it's saying no to like opportunities in business. Should we get on this path or this path? I'm very grateful. I've got a board of directors that really constantly stay focused, do one thing really well and crush it, and then get on to the next, not say yes to all of these. Because look, there is an abundance of opportunities, in my opinion, if you keep your eyes open for it. It doesn't mean you've got to do them all. So saying no to sugar, saying no to things that feel good or taste good or that make you feel good or that bring endorphins into your brain. And sometimes it's hard to do, right? I just got done reading Toxic Habits. It was an interesting book about kind of the mindset of creating structure and process around saying no, but keeping that discipline in. And I mean, I read so many books on how to say no, and it's still really freaking hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard. That was nervous system. I see it as nervous system. We get a little agitated, we get a little activated, and we want something to change the state, right? So to sit in that, such a hard skill set, but I think that's also where a lot of the wisdom comes from, of being able to make it through that, which is so potent. So curious for anybody listening, we always end with like a takeaway, some sort of a thing for people to implement into their lives. A takeaway could be something as simple as saying no, or anything that comes up for you from what we chatted about, or something you just like to offer to anybody listening that they can actionize.
We talked about it a little bit. And I think one of the biggest things that's impacted my life has been this notion of creating your tribe, or creating a group of people who you can be 100%, like completely shit. You don't tell anybody stuff, right? Honest, open. And it's, don't wait till there's a problem to create a tribe. Do it now, right? And find that, whether it's a K4 or it's some sort of a peer group, or, whether you're faith-based, if it's at your church, but if you're able to create that group and be able to express and unload things that are in your brain and mind and soul, and you can hear others, and everybody can contribute to somebody else's betterment, and then they can get a lot out of it. And I think that, I don't know where I'd be without my YPO forum. I got so much out of my K4 roundtable. That group of men were just unfreaking believable. And we all kind of found each other when we need each other. I'm in another forum. It's like every one of them does so much for me. They provide perspective, they provide inspiration, they provide accountability. I agree with you. Life is hard. It is hard. We're used to this Facebook culture where you pop on Facebook and everybody's successful and pretty and, fast and muscular, and it's all bullshit, right? I mean, they might be in that picture. One, you don't know what it took to get there. And 2, you don't know the real story behind all of it. And I got rid of Facebook January 1st for that reason, because I didn't need the noise. It wasn't contributing to the betterment of my life. But then being the best version of yourself, not comparing yourself to anybody, right? You then have this tribe where you can actually be honest, open, vulnerable, and you can hear their stuff. And I think that's better time spent investing in a group of people that invest back in you. What you find is it doesn't take long. This isn't a 3-year journey, right? I mean, our K4 program is 6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, maybe 12. Yeah. In that little bit of time in 12 weeks, I mean, I felt like a completely new man. So it's just committing though, right? It's making the commitment. So I don't want to go on and on, but I think if there was one thing that has impacted my life the most, it's that, in such a way where I couldn't imagine my life without it. I would hate the ability to not have that group to call on when I'm happy and when I'm sad.
So call to action is find a tribe. If you don't already have a tribe, go find a tribe, whether it's us in K4, whether it's another community out there, YPO, EO, there's so many different groups out there. Or if you are in one, I'd say recommit, commit deeper, re-engage, open up about something you haven't opened up, and take it to a deeper level with the current crew you're already with, if you are already with the crew. For those listening, if I know you do a lot of speaking engagements, anything you'd like to share, how people can get a hold of you if they either want to bring you on as a speaker or learn more about your entrepreneurship programs you're doing, or anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always love to connect with great people. Whatever your background is, whatever your profession is, I just love great people. And so you can always get a hold of me through LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Amish, Amish, Shah, Shah. Krest, Krest is the name of my company. You'll see me pop up on LinkedIn. If you reach out to me, I'll connect with you, and then I'll share my cell phone number and all that stuff. And even if you just wanted to chat, hang out, whatever it is, I'm always grateful to meet and connect with great new people.
Awesome. And hey, been so fun. Amish, thanks so much for joining us. It's just fun to wrap. I learned new things today, and it's always do every time we're spending time together. And I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your wisdom with our community and audience. Thank you, brother.
You are an inspiration, and I love watching what you do. And it needs to be said that, what you guys are doing at K4 is changing lives and impacting lives. And so really thank you for everything that you're doing, buddy.
Thanks so much. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and stay battle tested.